conference organizers consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when conferences are being organized, they will usually have some sort of a theme. There will be a theme about like communication. So, in our field, like communication, excuse me, there will be something like communicating to create change or communicating for the betterment of society or whatever, right? So, there will be some sort of a conference theme. And then the first goal is to create panels that match that theme, right? So we want to have kind of a unified conversation about some sort of topic that's obviously relevant to the current moment. So, for example, conferences right now will be making, especially communication conferences, will be making panels related to kind of dealing with the current political environment, or maybe dealing with, as you were even sharing with listeners earlier, dealing with maybe the kind of violence that exists in places like in Minneapolis, right? So we'll have conferences designed to talk about these sorts of current topics. And then people who develop the panel proposals that are most relevant to that tend to have the upper hand because we want to kind of focus on whatever the theme is. Outside of that, it's whatever's relevant at the moment. So again, for academic conferences, the goal is to be thinking about whatever it is that academics think are important to deal with right now. So, for example, in my area, so I'm a social media specialist. That's what I focus my research on. So I'm a media psychologist, and I focus on the way we use social media. There's a lot of conversations right now about limiting exposure to social media, specifically for children, right? So there are different countries, like Australia, for example, recently just put together laws that say you can't access social media until somewhere like 16. So having panels that talk about that, like, well, let's really think about this from like a professional, like clear-eyed, like way of thinking, like, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How should we adjust the way we're doing things? So panels that are really relevant to whatever the current moment is will obviously get priority.
So these panels, just a little follow-up question. It is very like evidence-based and like on your research and everything that you've done.
Yeah, so that will depend on the nature of the conference and the nature of the panels. So again, sharing a little bit more about me. So as a social media specialist and a media psychologist, the type of research that I do is statistically informed. It's quantitative in nature. I turn things into numbers and look for statistical patterns, which means that any sort of panel that I'm involved in is going to be evidence-based. There must be quantitative evidence. Otherwise, I'm not convinced, right? So your reading might be whatever, but if you don't have some sort of statistical evidence to back that up, then I'm not particularly convinced, and the people on my panels tend to be that way. However, there are other panels, like there's different types, right? So, for example, in our discipline, we have people that do like rhetorical work, which is thinking about like the way that an argument was put together and like the meanings behind that argument and kind of the assumptions being made when Donald Trump says a certain type of thing, for example, like why, when he uses law and order, for example, as a phrase, what does he mean by that versus when someone else might say that? So like those sorts of panels aren't necessarily evidence-based necessarily, but they're still grounded in the type of literature that exists in that space.
So when you're, presenting your work and, talking about these topics, regardless of if you have that more like hard evidence with like the numbers and stats, or if it's more, abstract arguments, confidence is a big part of presenting your work.
Absolutely.
Right? So how does one remain confident when like maybe imposter syndrome is how a younger academic might feel?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about is knowing how to remain confident. If you have little experience, and this goes beyond academic settings, this goes to any sort of communication setting. If you have less experience, it's normal to feel really anxious and to think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do right now? Right? People are going to be listening to me or watching me or whatever, and I feel anxious about it. There are a lot of things that you can do, obviously, to try to reduce that type of anxiety. The obvious thing that everyone always talks about is practice, right? You got to practice before you show up. You can't just be there and be like, I'm going to do it now. Like, you got to think about what you're doing and really practice through that and practice with an audience, right? I mean, even if you're going to do something like maybe host a radio show, like you have to like practice that and know how to do it before you show up, right? So that's part of it. And then also, like, we're going to be talking about, again, when we get together tomorrow, like the other things that you just need to know about. Like, part of it is knowing why you're there and why other people are there too, right? So if I'm going to deliver an academic presentation to other academics, I'm going to tackle that in a slightly different way than if I go doing, a presentation to any other type of group, right? So I've done interviews with journalists before that are interested in like the implications of research. I'm working on a project right now where I'm doing a lot of stuff with law enforcement personnel. And so when I'm working with them, like that's a different type of presentation depending on who's there and what they want to know. So knowing why you're there, what the goals are, really influences kind of how you prepare and the confidence that you're going to have. So what we will be doing is talking about like the point of academic conferences, what the expectations are, what people are kind of looking for from you when you get there, so that you don't just show up and go, you know what, I have no idea what I'm doing. So trying to kind of just have a little bit more base knowledge so that it's, easier to show up and do what you need to do.
Yeah. So would you say that the presenter's depth of knowledge on a subject does lead to more compelling and engaging presentations?
So, okay, obviously on the last thing we were talking about, someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, what do you do? Okay, in this case, yeah, it is the case that the more depth you have, the more knowledgeable you are, the more compelling it usually is. Now, having said that, I could know everything in the world about a topic, and I may be just a terrible presenter. Like, I might be just boring. I mean, anyone listening to this, anyone who's ever taken a class before would know that you've taken a class with someone who just kind of monotone droned on, and you're like, man, I hate this class, right? But that person, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, was probably deeply knowledgeable of the topic. Right, so there's two sides of that, right? The more knowledgeable you are, the more experiences you can pull from, and the more knowledge you can pull from to just kind of on the fly say something that's just insightful, right? But there's also a practice to being able to communicate really effectively, especially in public speaking context. There's a reason why public speaking is part of the gen ed requirements of this university, and pretty much every university, is because the gen ed idea is, what are the things that everyone needs to be able to do? And one of those things is public speaking, right? Knowing how to get in front of an audience and speak to them in a way that's compelling. So again, to answer the question, it's the more knowledge you have, the easier it's going to be. But the more you prepare and the more you think about how to do this effectively, the more compelling it will be. That's honestly in some ways more important.
Right. And so with making these conversations more compelling, obviously there's this big question of like when you're picking your topic and everything, the question of who cares like about this conversation. So how do you answer that question of who cares when you're deriving a conference panel topic or even a good research topic?
Yeah, I tell you, if you go and ask a bunch of different professors, right? So if you're a professor at an R1 institution like USM, there's an expectation that we do research. We have to do research as part of the job. If you ask professors how they would respond to this, you'll get many, many different answers. Because it's one of the things that we have to deal with regularly is that question of who cares. So when I work on a project, right, so I've collected a bunch of data. I've got social media data, and I've analyzed it, and I've got some things that I think are interesting. The first step is I get that prepared to send off to a conference, and then, we'll see if they're interested, and if they are, then I go present that work. The next thing is I get it submitted to an academic journal, so it'll be published so that people in classrooms around the country or the world will look at it and use it as part of like how they learn about whatever the topic is, social media in my case. And it's a question you have to deal with across every step of that process. Like, who is the audience and why do they care? What is the reason for doing this? Especially because, you could research anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's useful, right? There's a lot of research that I've looked at that I go, well, I don't really know why this was done. What am I supposed to do with this? And so thinking about that from the very beginning, like, who is the audience? Like, I'm an academic, so I'm speaking to any graduate students that might be listening right now. I am an academic and I'm interested in a thing. Okay, great. That will give you the motivation to do it. But who else wants to know this? And if the answer is like 3 people, then maybe we need to shift gears. But if it's going to be something like, again, for me, I'm looking at social media, I'm looking at the way that we kind of engage with this psychologically and how it's affecting us, there are many people that would be interested in those findings. And so thinking about who the audience is will help you figure out who cares very early in the process. And then, of course, when I'm at a conference, who's here and why would they care specifically? And then tailoring the message to whatever it is that they're there for. Like, hopefully they're there for a reason. They want to see what I have to say.
Right. So when you're presenting at these conferences, and everything. Obviously, there's going to be a variety of people there. And so a big part of this is going to be networking, right? So networking is, of course, a big part of building your career in a lot of different ways. How big is networking in academic circles?
So networking is important for everyone, period. Right? It's not just academics, it's everyone, right? If you are listening to this, you are networking with somebody, I hope, because that network that you have is what leads you to all sorts of opportunities down the road. Like the people that you know, the people that you've met, the people that you've met in a professional capacity in particular, those are people that often will build connections for you down the road, for you to find jobs or to find internships or whatever it might be. For academic conferences, it is absolutely mandatory that you bring business cards with you because there is an assumption that you will be networking while you're there. That is one of the primary purposes of even doing this. So when I go to the National Communication Association Conference, which I do almost every year, it's hosted in November. It's at a time of the semester where academics are busy and we're doing things, but we're all coming together for a reason. We're coming together to talk about the research that we're doing and to network with each other. And so you come with business cards, you talk with people, you go to panels, you spend time just kind of engaging with why you're there in the first place, which in this case is academics. But again, you can use this in any context. If you're going to a film festival, right? If you're a film student, you go to a film festival, you're there for networking. It's the same thing. You bring business cards, you connect with people, and you make those connections because they will almost certainly pay dividends down the road. And even if they don't, there's nothing wrong with getting along with a person and like talking with them for a while. Like that's just inherently good. And so it's really, really, really important. And we will talk a lot more about that tomorrow during the event too, is about kind of why everyone's there, how you network, what sort of events go on. So there's many events or social events and stuff that happen during these conferences where you get to meet people. And for graduate students in particular, this is one of the places where you tend to network with folks who will open up doors later when you're looking for a job. So if I want to be a professor, look, there's a lot of people that want to be a professor, but it's not easy to get those jobs at all. And so meeting people and talking with them and building connections so that you're a recognized name is pretty important. So we'll talk about that more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. Is there anything that you wanted to leave our listeners with as kind of like a...
Yeah, I guess the main takeaway is, like, be strategic in whatever you do. Like, I want to just speak to grad students. I'm speaking to everyone. Like, just think about what you're doing and think about why you're doing it. And so this is a good case of let's sit down with graduate students in particular and think about one of the main things we do, which is going to conferences and talking about our work and thinking about why you're there and how you can be more confident just by knowing the purpose of even being there in the first place.
Awesome. So remind me, when is this presentation?
This is tomorrow from 12 to 1 p.m. in the J.B. George building, 142.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about the presentation. And if you're a grad student listening, you should definitely go check that out. Coming up, we've got a news wrap from Sophia Vetrano on a new opportunity for student workers on campus. Check it out.
The university has launched a new program for student workers on campus in efforts to boost professionalism. The creator of the program, Akeem Gilliam, is the Job Location and Development Coordinator at the school. He explains what this initiative is.
It's a program that helps student workers develop competencies in 3 areas. That's problem solving, professionalism, and teamwork. Once you complete this course, you will receive digital badges that you could also add to your resume as well as your LinkedIn profile.
It is a 10-week online course consisting of numerous assignments that does not count for college credit but helps prepare students for the job market.
Because when you get in that interview, there are going to be 10 to 50 people who all graduated from college. What's going to separate that candidate? A lot of times what separates them are credentials.
Student employee Emily Blue shares her opinions on this new program.
So I'm actually really excited about this opportunity. I love getting any opportunities through school to enhance my resume, enhance my LinkedIn, and make myself look more marketable for any future job opportunities. So I personally am really excited for this.
Gilliam encourages students to participate in the program because the badge symbolizes a lot to employers.
Student employment competency badges, they're silent, but somehow they speak.
If you are a USM student worker looking for a resume boost, Akeem Gilliam at Career Services encourages you to join his Competency Badge Initiative. Sophia Vetrano, SMTV News.
to Southern Miss Today on Southern Miss Radio. Many thanks to Carl, our producer, Liam, our audio engineer, and Meadow, our film producer, for keeping this bird soaring. We especially want to thank our general manager, Dr. Martin, as well as our guest, Dr. Brent Hale, today. That's all for today on Southern Miss Radio. Thank you all for listening, and remember to stay golden and warm. I'm your host, Adeline, signing off.